So if you wanted to stop watching this video right now and you want to say that, you know what, whenever I write a function, I'm just going to use a fat arrow function from now on. You could generally do pretty well, and you could definitely succeed at web development for a long time. But there is one more very important aspect to fat arrow functions that we're going to talk about in this section. And this is really what fat arrow functions are for and what they solve. Yeah, the compact syntax is nice, right? Like writing fewer characters on the screen is great. But there's one more aspect to fat arrow functions that is extremely important. Let's figure out what that is. So I want to write an example on the screen right here. I want to write an object that's going to represent a team of people, okay? So a team of people. So I'm going to make my object, and we're going to imagine that this team of people might have two members on it, Jane and Bill, and so we will reflect them with their names as strings. So I'll have Jane and Bill. So that's the members on my team. And maybe the team name is going to be, God, I just come up with the worst names, but I mean, all right, Super Squad, let's run with it. Don't matter, just run with it, let's go. So let's then make a team summary, okay? This is gonna be a function that prints off a summary of our team. So who's on my team and what is the team name? So inside of here, I'm going to say, we're going to map over the list of people on our team. And for each member that we have, we're going to print out a string that says something like Jane is on team Super Squad and Bill is on team Super Squad. So we will map over our list of members, and for each member we have, we will return a string that combines the individual member with our team name. Okay, so that's going to be the goal here. So inside this function, I'll write this .members.map function. And we're going to pass in the name because that's what we're mapping over here. And you know what, actually I should be really consistent. We've got members, and so this should really be member. So we're mapping over a list of members. Every step through the function, we're going to be working with the individual member. Then inside of the map, we're going to want to return a string that says something like Jane is on team Super Squad. And so we can use template strings for that. So template strings in practice right here. So I'll put on my backtick along with the curly braces and the $sign. So here's my member is on team this.team name. Cool. So now whenever I call team.teamSummary, I'm going to map over my list of members. That's going to return an array of strings of something like Jane is on team, blah, blah. I've said it enough times now. You get the idea. You get the idea. So let's run this function now. We'll run team.teamSummary, and what do we get? Lo and behold, cannot read property team name of undefined. Huh. All right. That's an interesting one. Now, I suspect you've probably, if you've been writing JavaScript for any amount of time, you've probably seen this error message before. Okay, you've probably seen this before. So let's read this very literally. Cannot read property team name of undefined. So we are trying to access a property called team name on an undefined object. So let's look at our code, try to figure out where that might be happening. So we're only making one reference to a property of team name, and that's right here inside of our mapping function. So it appears that when we run this iterator function, the value of this, which I really want to be the team in this case, the value of this is coming back as undefined. And so I'm basically saying undefined.teamName, and that's what's generating this error down here. So we definitely have an issue with this implementation right here. Like there's definitely something going wrong, okay? So let's try to figure out what's going wrong here and how we're going to fix it with ES6 arrow functions. So I'm going to pull up a diagram here, and I feel like this diagram isn't super effective, but it's really the best thing I could think of. So let's just give this a shot. So we are running a function called teamSummary, and inside of there, we're then calling members.map, or this.members.map. When we call members.map, we are passing in our iterator function. Now this function that we're creating, we are passing it off to essentially somewhere else in our code base. Like that's what's really happening here. When we create this iterator function, we're creating the function and then we are passing it off to map. So it's going like into the ether. It's going somewhere into the browser where we have no idea when or where it's going to be executed. Whenever that happens, whenever we are passing off an anonymous function somewhere else in our code base, the value of this inside of that function is lost. And that is exactly what is going on here. We created an iterator function. We're passing it off to somewhere else in our code base. And so the value of this, when the function actually gets called, is lost. So this is not equal to my actual team. Now there's a couple different ways of solving this, right? Definitely a couple different ways. With ES5, we might have used the bind helper. So we could say something like bind this. So we bind the function's context to the current context, which means that when we actually invoke the function, the value of this will be correct. So that's one possible way. And I'm going to very purposefully go through these like possible solutions kind of quickly here. So if you're not familiar with bind, do not sweat it. Bind is, knowledge of bind is not a necessity. If you're used to jQuery, I bet you've done something like this, something like var self equals this, and then inside of the loop said self.teamName. So now we are caching a reference to this outside of the function and then making reference to that cached version inside the function. So both of these are definitely reasonable ways to approach this problem, but as you might imagine, the whole purpose of arrow functions here, that's kind of what we're building up to, is that it solves this entire pain right here. It solves the issue with having to make reference to this and worrying about the context or the value of this inside of these callback functions. So let's take a break, come back in the next section, and figure out how arrow functions solve this problem and exactly what arrow functions are solving for us. All right, so I'll catch you in the next section.